Okay, good morning. Good morning, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure seeing you here. This is the third session of the SIWI Seminar, Achieving the 2030 Food and Nutrition Targets Through Water Security. So it's really about the nexus between food and nutrition, or food production, food systems and nutrition, as well as water security to make that link. We had a first session online, which a couple of key messages, which we will discuss later. And we just had finished a second session, which was also very exciting. And I think in both sessions, I found it interesting that we had a mix of speakers from government, speakers from academia, research and development, but also NGO sector, private sector. And particularly in the last sessions, we had SME representatives as well as multinationals. So it's kind of very interesting players are involved in that discussion beside UN, international organizations, etc. And now it will be the third session. We hope for an interactive session. We drafted the program here. We have the first setting the scene presentation by Ambassador Ferrero, and then we're going to have three presentations from the abstract that were submitted. We'll introduce the speakers in a minute. And after that, we will break out. And I'm very happy that the room is almost full and still filling up, see people coming in. It's up to you in the audience to discuss and help us with some key messages that we want to convey out of that water food thinking to the UN 2030 conference next March. So we come to that later. But the interactive element with the World Café will be a very important part of the discussion. This is roughly what we want to do in the next 90 minutes or so. And it's a real pleasure for me to introduce the first speaker. It's Ambassador Gabriel Ferrero. But also here, unfortunately, the very busy agenda of Ambassador Ferrero didn't allow him to come, but he sent this morning, literally at the 11th hour, his presentation. And Ambassador Ferrero is the chair of the UN Committee for World Food Security, which is a very important part for the water sector. As we know, there are some countries where more than 90% of all water withdrawals are used for food and agriculture. So that is really absolutely critical to have this nexus, and we're looking forward to listen to the opening remarks from Ambassador Ferrero. Can we have this video now, please?
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to join you today to celebrate World Water Week 2022.
Can we have the video?
Water is indeed life, life nourished through our food systems. It is little wonder, then, that 70% of global freshwater withdrawals are used for agriculture. That said, the relationship of food systems with water is somehow broken. First, over-abstraction of water causes local and regional water insecurity and leads to water scarcity. Second, over-reliance on rain-fed agriculture makes us vulnerable to extreme weather events. And third, food waste and food loss leads to wastage, water and other resources. Today, climate change, land degradation, uncontrolled urbanization and economic development, population growth, and changing lifestyles are increasing pressure on water. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this year's commemoration of the World Water Week comes against a worrying background. As we speak, most countries around the world, from Asia to Europe, from Africa to the Americas, are facing the worst droughts in history. Around the world, major rivers that are a source of livelihood for billions of people are drying up. And while we see droughts threatening livelihoods across the world, we are moved by the terrible news from Pakistan, where 1,000 people has lost their lives as flash flooding from an extreme monsoon is washing away villages and crops. All these unprecedented events threaten to worsen the global hunger and malnutrition crisis, which is already dire. Moreover, the impact of climate change and conflicts is making even more challenging the management of the trade-offs at the nexus between water, energy and food security. But while our food systems exert the greatest pressure on water availability and quality, and are impacted the most by lack of water, they have the greatest potential for sustainable water management. Colleagues, now more than ever, how we manage and utilize our water resources will be critical to achieving global food security and nutrition. Hence, we need urgent action to strengthen participatory water governance, to invest in improved water management for food systems, and to promote sustainable utilization and efficiency of water resources to ensure food security and nutrition now and into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the enormity of the challenges, I remain optimistic that we have what it takes to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 2 on zero hunger. However, change will not happen in a vacuum. It has to be intentional, coordinated, and urgent. Importantly, our actions must be anchored within communities, within local, national, regional, and global policy frameworks. As I start, I offer partnership with the Committee on World Food Security of the United Nations in FAO, which I have the privilege of chairing. Established in 1974 and reformed in 2009, the Committee on World Food Security serves as the most inclusive intergovernmental platform of the United Nations that connects governments and all key stakeholders to coordinate and agree on global food security policies for food systems transformation. In this way, and since 2009, the Committee on World Food Security has delivered globally agreed voluntary guidelines, principles, and policy frameworks in a diverse array of issues, including on climate change and on water management for food security and nutrition. These policy tools are a valuable set of resources to inspire and guide our governments and also individuals in the formulation of policies, strategies, legislation, regulatory frameworks, and behaviors. This is why I encourage all of us to promote the uptake of these global agreements. And I also invite you to continue using the Committee on World Food Security global platform to connect with others, to discuss and agree on critical issues related to water and to showcase progress in your work. We look forward to continue working with you to ensure that water issues feature prominently on the global agenda, both in the build-up to the UN Water Summit in 2023 and in the global response to the food security crisis the world is facing these days, and of course, towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Ferrero. It's a pity that he can't be here personally, and I found it very, very refreshing that somebody responsible for global food security puts water so central and really said that water should feature very prominently at the UN 2023 conference next March. So that was a good start. Now we will have 3 presentations before we move on to the World Café session, and it's a pleasure to invite Nadita Umbalana. Please come on stage. Nadita is actually a PhD student at the University of California, working at UC Davis, and she works on macropore, so water flow in the soil. For this is quite detailed. But today she will not speak about her PhD results, but she will present a program when she was working for the World Bank recently. Nadita, over to you.
Thank you. Oh, it's not in English. Oh, okay. Yeah, very good morning to everyone. I'm Nadita, and I'm gonna speak today about a study that we did in Sri Lanka called, we developed a framework to improve climate resilience in smallholder agriculture systems in Sri Lanka. So let me first give a brief background to the water resources and the agricultural sector in Sri Lanka. So in Sri Lanka, agriculture uses about 87% of freshwater withdrawals and is essential for a large rural population for providing livelihood and also for their food security. So the dry zone of Sri Lanka constitutes to about 60% of the total land area of the country, and a dominant feature of dry zone agriculture are smallholder farming. And a characteristic feature of smallholder farming is that they are supported by village irrigation systems or minor tank systems where these irrigation systems support crop production, inland fisheries, livestock, and improve farmer incomes. And as such, they are a vital source for food and nutritional security and climate resilience. So agricultural production naturally is subjected to limitations within these systems due to the spatial and temporal variability of rainfall that limits the water availability at a given location at a given time. So on top of these natural limitations, Sri Lanka is located in one of the most vulnerable regions in the world to climate change. So this just further exacerbates the existing challenges. So with the increase in demand for food and competition for water and adaptation in the agricultural sector with the central focus of water resources management is vital to ensure food security in this context. So in light of that, we designed a framework that can support well-informed decision-making in water resources management to improve climate resilience of smallholder agricultural systems in Sri Lanka under foreseeable future conditions. So we selected this region called Ranorava Cascade, which is located in the north western part of Sri Lanka. So let me first tell you what a cascade is. And a cascade is a interconnected minor reservoirs that constitutes within a microcatchment, and they are supported by ephemeral rivers. So the Ranorava Cascade that we have selected consists of 17 minor tanks and covers about 23 square kilometers of area. So let's look at the methodology that we have adapted for this study. So we primarily selected the water evaluation and planning tool to set up this model, and within this model, within WEEP, we have the current accounts and a reference scenario. So in the diagram, you can see how we set up the current accounts. We have 17 minor tanks interconnected, and their demands and supply sources are all mapped within the current accounts. And we have considered three water demand sectors: agriculture, domestic, and livestock within the Ranorava catchment. And we have set up the reference and the baseline scenario. We have selected the 2016 to 2044, a nearly 30-year period for this, and it is essentially a business as usual scenario, and it is established based on existing hydrological, demographic, economic, and technological trends. So in addition to that, the second component was setting up these future scenarios under which we tested the system, and then we have come up with these 14 scenarios. We tested climate change scenarios where essentially water supply will be affected, and we checked population growth scenarios where the water demand will be affected, and couple of adaptation strategies. Under demand side management adaptation strategies, we have tested introducing high value crops, and under supply side management, we tested storage augmentation and improved canal systems, and we also tested a couple of combination scenarios. So let me move into the results. And so under the business as usual scenarios, what you see on the left is the water balance, average water balance conditions in the 30-year period that we have studied. So what is important to notice here is that out of the water yield, that is basically the runoff, nearly 50% of the runoff is going out of the basin as drainage outflow unutilized, while there still exist unmet demands within the basin, within the catchment. So we also, on the right, you can see how the unmet demands in the agricultural sector vary over this 30-year period. And what you see is that every year there's a certain amount of unmet demands, while we still have water flowing out of the basin unutilized. And so we wanted to test different scenarios to see if we can potentially nullify or reduce these unmet demands in the agricultural system. So these are the scenarios that we tested, and so we compared everything against the reference scenario where business as usual is practiced. And what is important to notice under the climate change scenarios is that the average conditions for the near future up to 2044, we noticed that the average annual rainfall is increasing. Thus, it's increasing the water supply potential, but that is just the average conditions. That's why you notice that the unmet demands are reducing compared to the reference scenario. But if you look at the population growth scenarios, obviously the unmet demands in the agricultural sector is increasing compared to the reference scenario. And more interestingly, when you look at the combined scenarios of climate change and population growth, which is the more realistic situation, we see that the unmet demands are increasing compared to the reference scenario, which is unfortunate, because if by any chance there's a potential for reducing unmet demands under improved water availability under climate change scenarios, that will be cancelled off by the increasing demands under population growth. So we have also tested several adaptation strategies, and out of them, the introducing high-value crops are the most efficient in reducing the unmet demands. And we also noticed that one of the storage augmentation scenarios that we tested resulted in an increased unmet demand compared to the reference scenario. But this is because in the storage augmentation C scenario, what we did was, in addition to augmenting the storage of existing reservoirs, we also included 4 additional reservoirs, and alongside we increased the command area, the total command area of paddy fields in the catchment. So it resulted in a total increase in unmet demands compared to the reference scenario. So we also looked at the groundwater storage, how each of these scenarios will affect the groundwater storage, and we realized that introducing high-value crops and improving the canal systems by lining the canal systems reduce the return flow to the groundwater storage, because under these scenarios we essentially improve the field efficiency and also the channel efficiency in transporting water. So let me wrap up by these conclusions. So what is important is that although the average conditions in the near future project an enhanced water supply under climate change scenarios, we did notice there's high interannual variability compared to the baseline period. Under climate change scenarios, there was high interannual variability in rainfall. So what is challenging is addressing the interannual variability of precipitation and also managing climate extremes under climate change scenarios. And also, we noticed that introducing high-value crops has the potential to reduce unmet demands most effectively, but then there was also a depletion in the groundwater storage that further needs to be studied. And we also found, most importantly, that demand-side adaptation is more effective than supply-side adaptation strategies in reducing the unmet demands in the agricultural sector. So we conclude that the presented framework can facilitate informed decision-making to improve resilience of smallholder farmers and also reduce their climate vulnerability probably by incorporating the recommendations that we present. And what we recommend is to extend this study to incorporate a cost-benefit assessment of the scenarios that we have tested, and in addition also to include expert knowledge in deciding cropping patterns and deciding high-value crops. And also for the climate change scenarios, we suggest that larger ensemble of members could be used when designing the climate change scenarios, and also using high-resolution climate data, and improving the accuracy of results by including more field measurements within the framework. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. I think we have time for one question, if there is. Everybody's impressed. Usually we see that climate change make the unmet water larger, but here it was the other way around. It's an area that seems to become wetter. But there's no specific question. Then we thank again, and we move on to the next speaker. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to invite Dr. Michelle Chu. Michelle is the Associate Director of the Research Connect at the James Cook University. Before that, she held a senior position at ASEAN, and there she was the Assistant Director for Science and Technology at the ASEAN Secretariat. And before that, in Singapore, she was leading the National Security Coordination Secretariat, and particularly co-chaired a research program on future resilience. Over to you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just told that we have a problem with the presentation and we need to reload that. And Dr. Riyad, can we move on to the next speaker already? Sorry, this was a quickie, but while we are reloading the presentation for Michelle, it is a pleasure to introduce Dr. Riyad. Dr. Riyad works for the Max Foundation in Bangladesh, and he is responsible there particularly for Bangladesh and Nepal, and I hope we have this presentation now.
Can we get a technical person?
Sorry?
Can we get a technical person?
What happened here? It's frozen.
Okay, we have time for another question for Sri Lanka, actually. There is a question. While we are sorting out the presentations.
Good morning, Kathy Boomer with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. I appreciate your attention to the groundwater aspect and wondered if you could say a little bit more about the groundwater resource. Is it a deep aquifer or shallow aquifer?
It's a regolith aquifer. It's about it's a deep regolith aquifer that exists. Yeah.
So not one that could be managed and recharged. It's kind of a...
It can be recharged from the rainfall, but then the loss from agricultural fields will contribute to the unconfined aquifer, unconfined aquifer, or the subsurface, basically. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And over to you, Dr. Riyad.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome to my presentation. It's a nice weather today. And one question, if you think in your mind, that how we enjoy our life, it's always good. But if we think how people enjoy their life when they struggle in the beginning of their life due to nutrition. If they suffer from malnutrition, then a struggle starts from the very beginning and it goes on all over the life. So this is a big question that we need to work, and that's why we are working for under 5 children. My presentation is to show how integration of wash and nutrition works and how a private sector involvement make a big change. In our presentation, the integration for stunting impact the healthy village approach. I would like to tell you the story, our experience in Bangladesh, how we did it, and what actually we found. This is a program that we designed in 2015 based on some study that found by Newman in SHINE trial that indicated that if a wash, nutrition, and healthcare are combined together, integrated together, then it can give the maximum output in terms of nutritional. So stunting was an indicator taken there, and we also followed that. We designed Healthy Village based on the WHO framework and using the theory that we combined many theories together. Particularly, I, of course, tell the name Dr. Robert Chambers, the PRA theory that we used here, and also Dr. Eisen Fishbein, whose theory also used here, and also World Bank studies and many other studies. We took the recommendation to design this program. We call it Healthy Village. It's an integration that we do. Particularly, we integrated wash, nutrition, governance. But another important thing that is talked too much, it is private sector. So we designed a private sector-led program where private sector assigned the major task to make the change. We engaged the micro-level entrepreneur, we call HPA, Health Promotion Agents. They are entrepreneurs. We trained them. We supported them to reach door-to-door, community to community with knowledge, with messages, and also with the products that people need due to the demand. We started our program by measuring the children. So data is very important here. We don't know who is suffering. We don't know who is dying. Every day, 1,000 children is dying. We don't know who is particularly dying. If we would know, then we could act. That's why data-driven approach became an important issue in our program, that we need to know who is at risk. So the risk children need to be identified. And that's how the local government, the community, and the entrepreneurs and private sector need to act. Otherwise, we cannot work in the dark. What we designed, that we first identified the children, then we ignite the community with that data, ignite the government sector also with that same data. And also we use this data to utilize for private sector demand creation. So that's how it's become a data-driven approach, also an entrepreneur-driven approach. But local government had a very big role for controlling standard setting, norm setting, etc. The goal here we set to reduce water and fecal-borne diseases. But we took stunting as a proxy indicator for this approach. So stunting, though it is a lot of debate there, stunting had a lot of things, but when we apply this, it is not such what we thought earlier. It's really simple. Utilizing stunting data is not a hard work. Now, healthy village, we set some indicator to declare a healthy village. You can see a picture here that is a declaration of healthy village done by the local government a few years back. We have some set of indicators, 17 set of indicators that includes wash, nutrition, healthcare, and also some government indicators and some private sector indicators. So it combines, and if a village have practice of 75% targeted behavioral change, then we call it a graduated village. And if it is 90% change, then local government comes to declare it a healthy village. When healthy village is declared, then local government became more responsible for stopping the slippage for future. And assigned private sector is more responsible to keep it up because they have a bigger market then. So the more the people have better lifestyle, they are better consumer. This is the theory. Here, when we are measuring the result, we see it's a really good result that we, even more than what we estimated in the beginning of the program. Here you can see we reached 1.2 million people, and it is not very costly. We spend more or less €7 per household. So it is very, very little amount we spent, but we try to take energy from the community, from the entrepreneur, and from the local government. That's how it became big. On the other hand, 19,000 children. We measured 76,000 children, every children in the community, and 19,000 children is the outcome who are saved from stunting. I'll say what the result came at the end. So this is a real scenario that we encourage to do more, and we are now doing a better design or using the learning for future. And this learning ultimately relates to the data. All things are here, and we set a lot of data management procedure internally, and also we use the data for measuring height and weight, the children nutritional data, anthropometric data, and also household well-being data, and communal data for wash, nutrition, safe water, hygiene, sanitary pad use, etc., etc. If I show the result, a dramatic outcome here, you can see we started with 51% stunting rate in the communities in average. And at the end of the project in 2021, in December, we found 25%. We are really surprised. How? Because there is COVID, there are some storm, flood, but still it happened. Even before the COVID, it was 1 to 2% per annual. But here, it's almost half. This is surprising, and that's why we come to share this tremendous outcome. Actually, we try to understand that why it happened, why this kind of pandemic and other things could not stop this change. Even people had less income, economic challenges. So we understood that there might be some real thing happened that related to entrepreneurial support. On the other hand, mothers' behavior, parents act on their children. Here, if we see another impact that we studied, that how it happened, that nutritional action have a large impact here. On the other hand, the sanitation also have a large impact. So wash and sanitation, it work together. So where the sanitation is better, the nutritional outcome is better. So that is the learning what we have now. On the other hand, one interesting key issue here is the entrepreneurship. We started with some entrepreneur. It is quite new. We had to introduce some local entrepreneur who goes door to door to sell the product, connects the sanitation marketing, connects the sanitary pad marketing, nutritional marketing, and then they bring all these things. And at the end, when we measured, we do measure annually, but at the end we measured that 12 million euro is invested by the community through the entrepreneurs in private sector, which was almost double than our project money. So it's a big leverage that we learned. Now, we are trying to scale it in the, out of Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, we are also scaling in urban areas by integrating more like climate change, also integrating the disability response, and also some other important issues that we could not include earlier. On the other hand, we are scaling it in Ethiopia, and also some tool and instrument are used in the Right to Grow program, which is also being implemented in 5 countries in Africa and also in Bangladesh. So that is what we have here. But one important thing that what we actually get out, take away from this program, we learned integration really works. In past, it was a confusion that whether wash have any relation to nutrition or not, whether the stunting can be prevented by only nutrition or only by wash, whether it will work or not. But we have the answer by our learning. So yes, integration really works. But it will work when you use private sector quite efficiently, because government supplies and other things are not really dependable when there are a lot of challenge in the government system and also in community have suffering from economic crisis. Then private sector need to act. And it also brings the banking, microfinance, and other relations in the community to solve a program in particular. Third, policy and strategic issues are there. If policy is something like that, then there are a big gap how to involve private sector, how to make them access in this scenario. That policy is needed. So that is end, and thank you very much. You may ask a question to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is impressive, like 50% less stunting in 3 years of a program. That is really very impressive. We have time for one question while the presentation of the next speaker is uploaded. Who has a comment or remark, please? Where do we have the microphone? Yes.
Very impressive, Dr. Riyad. Yan Zhen of South Tech China. I just have a simple question. In the same time period, in other areas of Bangladesh where you didn't have this type of intervention, what was the decline in child stunting rate?
In particular, during the COVID situation, there are limitations of having a study, that people, researchers could not go to the field. In other areas where there are some studies done, we try to check that how it really differs from the area where we worked. So it shows the difference, but we did not have enough information on that, how the other organization did study in the area where we did not work. But in our area, we also involve KIT, Royal Tropical Institute, to do some support in our research, and that also based on the COVID impact. And that really gives a lot of information that it's very difficult to share all this in this limited time, but it gives an indication that if such kind of preparation, because we started the program in 2017, and by this time more than 2 years already done, so it was a kind of preparation or something like that. We did not expect a COVID there, but when COVID come, people already have some good behavior like hand washing, hygiene, better hygiene. Yeah. So that's how it happened. It made
super.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
And now we finally have the chance to listen to Dr. Michelle Chu from James Cook University, and we hope a PowerPoint is there now. Yes.
Yes.
The futures from farm to fork, please.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll be sharing with everyone Singapore's journey in terms of water resilience through a futures lens, and then from there, the development of the extended figure 8 framework for sustainability. And then because water and food are so interrelated, we wanted to see whether this framework can be applied to food security, right? And with a little twist, instead of looking at agriculture per se, we will look at aquaculture, right? So in terms of water security and food security, the challenges for Singapore in these two senses of security are by and large the same, and therefore why we think that this framework is applicable. So Singapore is a small island state, so we are unable to capture all the rain that falls on Singapore. And that's why we invest heavily in infrastructure, such that now currently we are able to capture at least 2/3 of the rainfall that falls on us and channel them into our 17 national reservoirs. And besides investing in infrastructure, we also invest in R&D, such as membrane technology, which now enables us to have new water and desalinated water. So if we look at the journey of Singapore in terms of new water doing the econometrics analysis over the 10 years, we can see that in the initial stages, opportunities were created for our small and medium enterprises to work with the large and more established firms with the knowledge and with the know-how. And this was to encourage learning and knowledge exchange. And besides that, There was also innovation in terms of the procurement model, such that we saw an involvement from the design, bid, and build model to now what we call the design, bid, own and operate model, the DBOO model. And this model signals trust among the stakeholders, and it gives the private sector enough time to invest in technology, apply the technology, and have time to see their return on investment. So the knowledge exchange and learning resulted in knowledge that was actually indigenous in the Singapore context. And this worked to the advantage of our local enterprises, which allowed them to have a competitive advantage to bid for projects overseas. So we saw the expertise and the best practices being exported overseas, and thus this co-evolutionary model. And by this time, the focus had also expanded to look at sustainability. So we looked at ways to reduce energy consumption, increase energy efficiency, to co-locate the energy production and water treatment, such that we had waste-to-water plants, as well as looking at nature-based solutions such as biomimicry. So we were curious whether this framework could also be applied to Singapore's food security. Right. So Singapore is dependent, in fact, imports more than 90% of our food from overseas. And yet we set for ourselves an ambitious goal to be able to produce 30% of our nutritional needs locally and sustainably by 2030. So how do we do that? And by focusing on aquaculture, within Singapore, we have a Singapore Aquaculture Plan, which has several strategies, one of which is to open up and unlock new sea spaces, and also to invest in R&D. So the support for R&D will come through our National Research, Innovation and Enterprise Plan, of which in the first grant call, we saw an amount of 23 million Singapore dollars being awarded to 12 projects, of which 8 of these are related to aquaculture. And of these 8, we saw 4 that James Cook University was involved in. So the main essence is not about James Cook University, but the main essence is that all of these 12 projects, majority of them signal the coming together of the private sector, the public sector, as well as the academic institutions. So besides investment in R&D, so if you look, the Singapore government also helps the farmers to enhance their productivity. So if we look here on the picture on the left, if that is traditional fish farming and we equate that to aquaculture perhaps 1.0, then what you see here would probably be a leapfrog into aquaculture maybe 3.0, where everything happens from the breeding to the harvesting, from the processing, all happens on this very special floating platform, which is designed actually by the owner himself. So this platform combines marine technology, water treatment technology, as well as energy harvesting technology to enable all the processes to happen there. And why we call that a farm to fork? Because from there, the processed fish is then taken by the boat to the land, to the retail, to the consumer, and to the table, right? And on top of that, we are also encouraging the use of our resources for these processes in a sustainable manner. So in terms of water usage, so water is being treated before it's being used for the farming, and then after that, if there's any to be discharged into the sea, it will be treated before it's discharged. So it's sustainable and green because of the solar energy that it harvests. So if we look at the trajectory of food security in Singapore, I think it is on its way to resilience and sustainability. And we definitely see that this framework for sustainability is applicable to food security, at least in Singapore. And we hope definitely it will be used globally. So before I end, just very quickly, because we have heard throughout the days of what are the roles of the different stakeholders. So in terms of as an academic institutions can definitely contribute to national grand challenges and in fact the SDGs. And in terms of aquaculture in Singapore, James Cook University has contributed in terms of upstream aquaculture genetics, aquaculture nutrition, and downstream helping the farmers to improve the efficiency in terms of energy usage on the fish farms. And we have shown that academic institutions can be the bridge to bring together the public and private sectors. So going into the future, we hope to, of course, expand our outreach to more in the Asia Pacific and beyond, and also look to beyond fish farms, let's say to shrimp farms as well. And definitely we hope that we can be the central node for research and collaboration on topics that touches everyone's heart: circular economy, sustainability, water security, food security. So we have seen that there is the release of new sea spaces for aquaculture. This means that more fish will be farmed, more waste will be produced, but what does this mean for the quality of water in the sea? And we have also heard that there will be models for different models for collaboration and technology transfer, as well as financing. So the main takeaway is that water, food, nutrition, and energy, all these topics are very closely related, and it will be definitely more costly to address them alone. Then that's why we need to come together and collaborate and address them together. And more importantly, as I think we have heard throughout the two days, trust is also very important for everyone to come together and work together. Right, with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. We thank you. This was very inspiring. Is there one question? There's huge potential of this technology probably for other delta regions, coastal regions, small island states, etc. Somebody? And it's the WEF nexus in practice. Yes, Dr. Sasha Koh, please. Jenny, do you mind to bring a microphone?
Yeah. Is it this one? Thank you very much for a very inspiring presentation. I'm from FAO, so we've been working with Singapore for many years, especially in the reuse aspect of the advances in Singapore. Just wondering about the circular economy plans and outreach in the region. You mentioned in the Asia-Pacific region. How about globally in terms of the potential of harnessing all the advances in technologies? And you mentioned biomimicry as one, which is really energy efficient. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about scaling up and also going global?
Okay, thank you for your question. Because I'm presenting this on behalf of James Cook University, so actually we have just started this initiative not long ago, in fact just about 2 to 3 years ago, where the Tropical Futures Institute was being set up. So so far it has been challenging, but we will get there. And I would say that it really requires different models in various contexts, because we do see that for different countries, it's really, you have to, like the other presentations have shown, you really need to go down to the ground, and every single one is specific. So the model, actually, you may have a general model, but you need to adapt them. Yeah, but we definitely hope to reach out to more countries, globally if possible. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think the world was looking at Singapore for all these new water ideas over the last decades, but now they seem to lead new ways of farm-to-fork food production innovations. Can we go back to the other PowerPoint? And I invite my colleague Tom Williams from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development on stage. We will now going to the World Café discussion for the next 20 minutes or so. So we will break, and please remain on your table. If you don't have a critical mass of colleagues on your table to discuss with, you might want to merge with another table or see how it goes. We had 3 inspiring presentations just now, and also the keynote by Ambassador Ferrero. But this is not enough. We felt for a stimulus, and therefore we invite Tom to nudge the discussion for the World Café. Please, Tom.
Fantastic, Stefan. And World Café sounds like this very grand term, but basically means you're sitting at the tables and you're having a conversation with your colleagues about what you've heard today and in other sessions as well. Look, what I'm trying to do is to summarize. We've had 3 sessions of this seminar to give you some key points that we touched on in those seminars, and give you a bit of food for thought, excuse the pun, to take into your discussions. Ultimately, what we're trying to get out of the discussions is really to look ahead to the 2023 UN Water Conference. I see we have our colleagues from the Dutch government here, Henk, and Tajikistan as well, who are going to come onto the stage later and receive those comments and those key messages. So that's sort of the framing of this discussion, is really look ahead to the UN Water Conference in 2023 in terms of the key messages we want to see. So I'm going to give you 3 nudges of topics that you could talk about which came up in our seminars. And the first one is about the food and water nexus. You know, in our first session, we really framed the status of the food and water nexus. We know how much water is required for our food system. We understand that demand is going to grow by 50% by 2050 in terms of food and fiber. What's the implications of that on water use? But we still have this disconnect between the food sector and the water sector. So my first nudge is to talk about what does meaningful engagement between food systems, water systems, food sector, and water sector look like? What do you expect to be in place for that interaction, that engagement to be very meaningful between the food and water sector? Secondly, in our second session of this seminar, which was just before this session, we started off with a macro overview of the need for cross-sectoral, multi-stakeholder engagement. That's the path forward, that's what we need. And we zoned down into examples in the African region and specifically in Nepal of actions that were meeting the local context in terms of working this water, food, energy nexus. So my second nudge is about reconciling that global level commitment targets. How do you translate that down to local actions and priorities? And interestingly, from Sasha, those local actions, how do you then scale up globally? So your second nudge is to think about that global, local nexus. How do we translate global commitments into local actions and priorities? And then how do you actually scale up those local actions? And then my third nudge is about public-private partnerships. We heard about that in the second session. We had a multinational company talking about value chain collaboration, which is moving away from a transactional basis of value chains to more collaborative, how you work with farmers, how you work with retailers, for example. And we've heard in this session the importance of private sector and public sector participation. But I'd also like to broaden it out. This is multi-stakeholder. It's not just about private and public sector, but also indigenous groups. We heard about indigenous knowledge from that presentation. So what's the role of indigenous groups as well within a multi-stakeholder environment? So your third nudge is about how to really unlock the power of multi-stakeholder collaboration for this food and water nexus. So those are your 3 nudges. First of all, how do we really break down the silos and have meaningful engagement between the food and water sector? Secondly is how do we reconcile global priorities, commitments with local actions and priorities, and how do we scale that up globally? And then the third is about how do we really unlock that potential of multi-stakeholder collaboration. So take all of those nudges and more, and then address these 2 questions which are directed at the UN Water Conference in 2023. How do we need to show up as a water community around this water, food, energy nexus? And what do we need from our food colleagues as well in terms of showing up to UN Water Conference? So I'll stop there. Hopefully that set the scene, Stefan, and then we're ready to unleash everybody onto table discussions. Any more directions or guidance?
No, and feel free to discuss at the table or merge with other tables if you need a few people, and then we will, not every table will report back because of the lack of time, but just keep it to 1 or 2 main messages. If you can say it in 30 seconds, better than 60 seconds. Just what are the key messages that you would like to convey to our key facilitators also of the UN conference, who will be on stage just after this.
And everybody has different clocks. We're going to use this clock at the back, and we're going to end the discussions at
1:15 in 20 minutes.
20 minutes. So when it's 15 past, we're going to reconvene. So enjoy your discussions.
Great. Well
done. Is this the breakout, or are we waiting to be assigned? Are we? That's right.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm afraid I've only just logged into the session. I was a bit late arriving, so
same here.
I'm not quite sure where we are. Oh, right. So, who am I talking to?
This is Samir.
Samir. Oh, I can see your picture. Yeah.
Yeah. And you are?
Yeah. Melvin K. Hi.
Hi, Melvin. Hi. Yeah, I'm afraid we've missed the boat. I was jumping between sessions, and so ended up here, and now I see there's a breakout. So I was hoping someone could lead us into it, but I'm afraid.
What's this? I've just got a message up. Says Pathable Support is inviting you to join room 1.
Yeah, I see that as well.
Have you got that?
Yeah. I'm gonna hop in there.
Okay, I will as well. Okay.
All right. See you there. Bye.
First, Dr. Sasha Ko, she's the Deputy Director of the Land and Water Division at the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Please, Sasha. And it's a distinct pleasure, and we are really blessed in this session that we have from both countries who are coordinating the organization of the UN 2023 Water Conference, the Netherlands and Tajikistan. We have both special envoys. I think we have that also here on a picture. Can I have my slides again? No, we probably not. Mr. Henk Ovin, who is the Special Envoy for International Water Affairs of the Kingdoms of the Netherlands, as well as Mr. Sultan Ramid Soda, who is also the Special Envoy of the President of the Republic of Tajikistan, and also I think the CEO of the International Fund to Save the Aral Sea. So please, colleagues, come on stage. And while you are moving up, so which table has a key message for our esteemed panelists here? And soon Sasha will moderate the final 12 minutes. Key messages, and really keep it, crisp and short and to the point. Yes, there's somebody in the back. Can you shout, or can we have a microphone? One of the two, please. Yes, please. Sorry, no, for the online participants, we have a microphone. By the way, we have online participants, but due to the lack of time, we cannot really include all of that. But they will post their messages on Pathable. Over.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate the discussion we had, and I think my main message will be try to avoid key messages in 30 seconds, in all honesty. If I really see the... Yeah, I'm so sorry, but if I really see the complexity on this table, and there was really excellent work in Pakistan, India, different countries, California, every place is different, and you can have, I think, maybe blueprints of solutions, but you always have to interpret that locally. And I think that would be my key message, that if you are in the UN and you are there, it's very difficult to have one solution for all, but you have to interpret it locally. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Very helpful. And you still said it in 30 seconds. Yeah. Next table, please. Let's do a few tables, and then very quickly we hand over to the panel.
Yes, my name is Helen from Uganda, and our group was also very diverse, and taking it from there that we are from different contexts, the solutions must be community-centered. Let's take the context from the communities. Let's get that voice. Let's organize and mobilize the voice at the local level to take it to the UN. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful. Next table, here, please.
Hi, Andy Keck with Tetra Tech. Our table had a very nice discussion. Thank you for all the prompts. They were helpful. In short, we would recommend that you encourage the member states to recognize that this is a cross-sectoral challenge, and that national governments need to commit to having the ministries at the national level work together to take a basin-led approach that encompasses these participatory themes. And so just work as much as possible to help them specify their commitments, and that could take, as they said, many different forms in many different countries.
Super, thanks. And we see how much can be said in 30 seconds, or 60. Yes, please, here's a speaker on that table in the middle, maybe. Oh.
Hi, thanks. I'm Kelsey from the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. Building on a lot of what has already been said, we talked about starting with academia and at the high level with the ministry integration as well, developing curriculum that integrates water and food together, integration of our targets and goals at the high level so that those messages also talk to each other, that we aren't working for food security targets that are in opposition to our water security targets. And at the kind of biggest message, if we don't work together, then we kill each other, because we don't, those messages aren't integrated, so.
Thank you. One more table, maybe on the top left. And all other colleagues, I know there was many more messages. Make sure you type them in at the Pathable site. We will consider them when we synthesize the session for the final outcome statement of this week. And here we have a speaker on that table, do we? Okay, over.
So building, Kathy Boomer with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. We also spoke a lot about working at the local level taking lessons from the local level and having the UN help us scale those lessons across regional space so that we can reach our collective goals. And there was a second part, to remember that ground and surface water are a single resource, that they need to be managed together.
Good.
And also, sorry, but also giving producers accountability. So with everything that we're trying, giving them a mechanism to feedback what is not working. Because sometimes, you know, we're going into the wrong direction and we need to feedback that as well.
Thank you. This was inspiring. I hand over to Sasha for the final segment of this session. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you all, our water colleagues, to provide those insightful recommendations to our distinguished envoys from Tajikistan and the Netherlands. And thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here in Stockholm from our last meeting in Dushanbe water process. So it's been wonderful to have you to participate in this interactive segment. You heard from the floor the various encouraging recommendations. At least they come up with, you know, quite a few. And in the vision statement of the UN 2023 Water Conference, the two hosts will strive to make the conference a watershed moment, with the world uniting together on water. Can each of you, just mention in 2 minutes what your expectations are for the conference? And the microphone is there.
Thank you very much, Sasha, and thank you very much for organizing such a interesting session and having us on board. And thank you for active participation and having this kind of interactive dialogues and the key messages to us, to co-chairs of the conference. But at the same time, of course, we would like ask you in our collaboration, in our discussion here also, what will be your views regarding how we can make this conference a big success. So the conference itself is already historical, since it will be the second water-dedicated conference of the UN in the history of the UN, and the first one after almost 50 years. And our intention, co-chairs Tajikistan and the Netherlands, to make it historical, not in terms of its time, not because of the time dimension, but because of its results and because of its impact. From our point of view, the conference should make the real change in our minds, first of all, in our approach. We should understand, value, and manage water resources in a better way, in a better manner. But how to achieve it? Tajikistan and the Netherlands alone, I mean that as co-chairs, or we have support of the UNDC and UN Water Secretariat of the conference, we are not able, just having us on board, to make the conference a big success. Our intention, and it was mentioned by Sasha, to make the conference a watershed moment for the world. So that's why we need your support of the world community, across the sectors, across the stakeholders, having from the local communities, from the indigenous people and up to the governments. It was mentioned how important basically to have the local communities on board, and even in case of Singapore, it showed how the indigenous technology could help also to find the good solutions in this regard. So we need actions. We need new commitments for innovative and transformative actions, small and big, across sectors, across and inclusive one. That's why one of the main basically principle of our collaborative works on the road towards 2023 conference is action-oriented and inclusive approach. So in Dushanbe conference, which was mentioned basically by Sasha, it was held at the beginning of June this year. So we launched, co-chairs launched the Water Action Agenda. One of the outcomes of the UN 2023 conference, which will collect basically the commitments, this commitment and pledge to catalyze and accelerate actions to achieve SDG 6 and other water-related goals of the 2030 agenda. The Water Action Agenda is already launched in the conference website, and we are working hard now to fill it with the good commitments, with such a commitments which should make the real change. So our expectation that the conference should make a change, the real change in our minds, in our attitudes, in our approach, and of course in our agenda to achieve SDG 6 and other water-related goals. But for this, we need your help, your support. Please be with us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sultan. And thanks also for the partnership. As Sultan rightly said, we're in it together, becoming a little family, but we have the ambition to expand the family fast, because we need you all. I think some important remarks I'd like to combine with your question. I think the first is prevent to simplify. It's more or less how I summarize your even a longer message. I would like to reverse that too, embrace complexity. Because we know that water is so cross-cutting and is touching upon everything. You know, you find water in every sustainable development goal. But because we simplify, we silo, and because we silo, we fragment. Because we fragment, we are where we are now, lacking behind on all these goals and the Paris Agreement. Because behind those silos are vested interests and past practices and power structures that actually help us prevent to overcome those silos. So it's beyond fragmentation, it's the power structure that holds fragmentation actually in place, because that is benefiting the silos. Embracing the complexity, not only to prevent, to simplify, but see it as an opportunity, is exactly what water brings. If you have a water conversation, you immediately bring everybody to the table. But that doesn't go by itself. Look at the food system summons and the way how water is not addressed. So think again about food security. In the current crisis with the Ukraine, in Europe we're not talking about water with the current drought. We're talking about the drought. So the result, what we see that is impacting us, but not water security. Food security is not addressed through water security. Health is not addressed to water. We have 2.5 years of campaign now on WASH with the pandemic. Wash your hands. 2.3 billion people lack access to safe drinking water, over 3 to safe hygiene facilities, over 4 to safe sanitation facilities, impacting the most vulnerable first. But these 2.5 years campaign were not leading to results on WASH. So the complexity helps actually to provide us an opportunity to start, second, work on those solutions that are locally led, but have political buy-in from the top and are cross-sectoral and comprehensive. So I think your first remark, prevent to simplify, really is the opportunity for this conference. That is not easy because it is about this complexity, but we should not shy away, and I think we're all humans and we have the capacity to actually address that. And I think the ambition of the conference and the co-host, making this not an SDG 6 conference, but a conference on water across the 2030 agenda, including anything that is touching upon that, that ambition is perhaps ambitious, but it's also a necessity. It's at the core of finding opportunities on our way forward. This will not be easy, because we love our silos, we love our sectors because of vested interest and the way we organize. But it's the opportunity to fall in love beyond those silos, to see that opportunity of that complexity and those interlinkages. And I think here comes the transparency that was asked and the accountability in. We see often accountability as something to be afraid of, because it shows where we lack. That's like looking in the mirror. I don't know if you ever read Pirandello. It's an Italian writer, he's long gone, but he wrote this book called Nobody, Somebody and a Million. I don't know what the English, Iemand, Niemand en 100.000. Somebody, Nobody and 100,000. And it starts with the story of an Italian bureaucrat who goes to work, looks in the mirror before he leaves the house, and fixes his tie. And his wife says, are you looking at your shallow nose? and his whole world crumbles because he never understood that his nose was shallow. He also never understood that that is exactly why his wife fell in love with him. So he sees it as a negative. So a very short story to get to accountability. We see accountability as something to be afraid of. But it actually provides us that exact insight in that complexity, also in our performance, how we can learn what works and where we can find opportunities for scale. Now, food security and water security are one and are also linked to health and biodiversity and climate. So fixing food is also part of failing markets, systems approach, and then I lead to the ambition of the conference. As Sultan said, it is about actions. We bring the actions together in a water action agenda. Millions of actions that can come in from communities, schools, children, smaller scale, that can be empowered by being part of this movement, of this watershed moment to change the world. A second layer of institutional commitments that provide that insight in that complexity and what actions really mean across the 2030 agenda with the accountability mechanisms that are needed. And a third layer that is still empty about systems change. And when we talk about food security, it's a market fix, not a farmer's fix that we have to focus on. And that goes beyond our vested interest and the policies and the practices of the current and the past. I'm not sure if we'll get to real game changers in that level, but we at least aim for that. And I think the nexus of food, health, nutrition, water, biodiversity is such a nexus where we can find a game changer. The question is there political will and leadership, societal will and leadership, private sector will and leadership, and financial sector will and leadership to actually overcome the locking that we currently face in that market failure. So I stop.
Thank you very much for those in-depth. Thank you very much to our envoys for the in-depth analysis on what to make the change needed for making the conference a successful one next year. So with that, ambitions for the conference, the institutional momentum that needs to be captured, as well as the system thinking towards it and embracing the complexity and not to be afraid of it. And I hope through the various meetings and global meetings that will be taking place between now and March next year, a lot of these will become more elucidated with commitments. With that, I think we have very little time.
We need to address a very practical issue.
Sure.
Because before you know it, it's March, and we need you before that. And so mark your calendars, October 24, October 25. October 25, the President of the General Assembly hosts a member states meeting to decide on the themes of the conference and all the organizational matters in front of us. The co-host, based on a preparatory process you already alluded to, all these steps, proposed 5 themes with all the input of the world. Hundreds of organizations provided input, member states, the UN system, the Bonn Conference, the Dakar World Water Forum, the Kumamoto Asia-Pacific Water Forum, the Dushanbe Conference, bringing it all together, and a high-level symposium in Portugal at the Oceans Conference. We had a water pavilion at the COP and a high-level political forum. So we got building blocks from all, and the 2 co-hosts presented the 5 themes for the conference concepts that are there. But you might disagree, or you might agree, but think something is missing still. So October 24, before member states decide on the themes and set forward the process to get to the conference, is a stakeholder day, also hosted by the President of the General Assembly. And for those of you who are already accredited by the UN, you can join. For those of you who are not yet accredited by the UN, there's a second process of accreditation continue, but you can also join others. That's what the UN actually provides. If you're not yet through the bureaucratic process, but others are, you can be part of the other team to raise your voice. And if you can't come to New York, you can always send us an email and give us a call. We're humans, we have those instruments at our availability. Yeah, if we don't hear from you, it's not because we didn't want to listen, but because we weren't able to receive your message, perhaps because it wasn't sent. So make sure that what is in front of you, what you want to address, is there. So that's October 24 and 25. Important in prepping ourselves for that conference, to make sure that what lands on that conference really matters. And then second, practical, we need to know what we need to chase. I'm pretty sure that we all can envision a commitment that is necessary, that is beyond the limitations of who you are and who you represent, but that you can dream of or think of. Make sure we know and understand what that means and what we need to do to at least try to make that a reality. April 1 can't be Fool's Days for us. Yeah? It's not the moment where we take stock and say, oh, these are all the 100 things we forgot. No. Now is the day to realize that we can't forget anything, because before you know it, it's April 1, and we look in the mirror, and not only our noses are shallow, we also look bleak. And we have to take pride in that conference and make it a success. And we need you to make that a success. So help us prep, help us think through what we need to achieve, because it is of critical importance. And also join us towards October 24 and 25 to put on the agenda what you think needs to be on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Hank, and thank you, Sultan, for your presence here and to echo these very key important messages. The conference organizers are telling me we need to vacate the room, so I'm sorry we have to bring this to a close. And please take action. The action is now. Please make your comments also known on the UN Water website, in which we're taking stock of many of the commitments. Thank you very much for your presence in this segment.